Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Landcare series of webinars leading up to our teleconference, our Landcare conference this year. We've been delighted to bring a series of webinars that include topics from each of our conference streams. This is an opportunity to sort of dig deep into some of the details and opportunity to put some of the speakers at the front of the audience for those who can't always make those conferences. To make sure you're at the front seat of all the latest news about the conference and other Landcare projects we have underway, make sure you sign into Landcarer, because that's the front page of what we're doing in Australia today. Before we get into the webinar today, and we've got some great presenters, I'd like to provide acknowledgements of country. Landcare Australia is a commitment to reconciliation, and especially now as this group is gathering around Australia to steer environmental best practice programs for all Australians in the landscape, we offer this acknowledgement to country. So for wherever you've joined us from today, I'd like everyone to take a short moment to reflect and acknowledge the traditional owners of the country. Today I'm speaking from Gubbi Gubbi country up in southeast Queensland. We recognise the traditional owners, the continuing connection to land, water and culture, and pay our respects to your elders, past, present and emerging. Today's webinar features Dr. Heather Channon from the National Feral Pig Management Coordinator Group and her guest Troy Crittle from New South Wales DPI. Today we're going to discuss the major problems and the significant threats that pigs have on Australia's environment, cultural site and food production. Now, before we get into the actual presentations, a little bit of housekeeping. We have the opportunity to provide live comments and questions to the presenters, but to make sure your questions throughout the session, we have some, at the end of the presenters, to make sure you get your questions in through texting them in or pushing them into the website. We will go through the presentations, and at the end of it, we'll have the opportunity to ask these questions directly to the presenters. So if you need to submit a question, make sure you're signed into Landcarer. Type the question into the comment box beneath the webinar screen and you'll be able to see those come up as we go. So if you have any technical issues getting into Landcare or Landcarer, click on the screen help button on the bottom of the left-hand side of the screen, and that'll put you directly in chat with the IT team that can help you with live support throughout the webinar. If you're not signed into Landcarer, you can email for help at hitere@landcarer.com.au. Now, we'd like to kick off the presentations with a special thanks to the Australian Government's National Landcare Program for funding the Landcare Conference and also the good work that Landcare does nationally. So without further ado, we're going to talk to Heather about pigs, feral pigs, and what their impact on environment, food production and cultural heritage. G'day Heather, how are you?
I'm great, thanks Mick. It's great
Excellent.
To be here.
Excellent. Impact we see in pigs.
Well, thank you all firstly for this opportunity to discuss feral pigs and the National Feral Pig Action Plan. So I started in this role as a National Feral Pig Coordinator in March 2020, and this is a 3.5-year program that's being funded by the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment and is being managed through Australian Pork Limited. So the Feral Pig Coordinator program was initiated in November 2019 in response to the ongoing threats of African swine fever entering into Australia. In addition to their threats on the Australian pork industry, extensive and diverse threats and risks are caused by feral pigs. Next slide, please. There are 4 objectives of the program. The first one, to facilitate the national coordination of feral pig management, surveillance and control activities. Secondly, to engage with stakeholders through ongoing communications and engagement activities. The third, to drive effective cross-sectoral and government investment in feral pig control. And finally, to looking at raising awareness of feral pig issues. So really with all of that, it's there is a lot of focus here on making sure that we're supporting landholders. you please click on the presentation. So I've led the development of the National Feral Pig Action Plan, which is the first national framework that's been developed by feral pigs that will enable local, regional and state and territory feral pig management plans to be aligned together with an independently chaired steering group. Next slide, please. The plan has been developed to address a number of issues, and these aren't necessarily in order, but the first of these, of course, is primarily the plan is focused on supporting land managers, increasing the adoption of integrated best practice management of feral pigs to control their populations and reduce their impacts. Also looking at a national coordinated approach, and as I mentioned, this is the first time that this has been enabled. Looking at increasing land manager adoption of integrated best practice management methods, using a landscape scale nil tenure approach, reflective, of course, that feral pigs don't obey fence lines, land ownership, and they're within their home range. It's also making sure that they're having the plan. It's a community-led program, and so really encouraging participation of land managers in local management groups. And also it's ensuring here that we have alignment across all management plans and making sure that we've got the, working from the bottom up to make sure that we've got that national strategic approach and positioning for feral pig management in Australia. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, with feral pig management, there are no magic solutions. Just click on it again for me. Yeah, so with this, it's making sure that we're doing this effectively. And the big point I wanted to make sure that people get from this today is an annual knockdown rate of at least 70% is needed to suppress the growth potential of the population and prevent population recovery. And during the talk that Troy will provide, he will provide you with some insights and principles around how we can help you enhance the effectiveness of the programs that you have in place. So with all of this, as I've just mentioned, the plan to be successful, working closely with all of those involved in feral pig management on the ground to increase the adoption of humane best practice management methods and building and supporting networks of land managers working on a landscape scale, nil tenure basis, so that together through coordination we can all achieve sustained reductions in feral pig impacts, which is the ultimate aim. The involvement of regional coordinators on the ground to work directly with local management groups, including those established for other vertebrate pests, is being actively pursued. However, for this and for other actions that we have in the plan currently, additional investment will be required, as these costs are additional to the current program that we have available and the budget that's available at the moment. So during this presentation, I'll talk through the National Feral Pig Action Plan and its intended purpose, the key actions that need to be addressed to significantly reduce the impacts of feral pigs that they cause across up to 45% of Australia's landmass, and very importantly, what having a national plan will mean for land managers moving forward. Next slide, please. So in terms of the plan, I want to take a brief moment to discuss this. It aims to shift feral pig management to being more coordinated, collaborative and strategic to support land managers to deliver sustained on-ground actions, moving away from the fragmented, reactive and short-term approach. It has a 10-year ambitious vision, and this is reflective, of course, of the long time frame that is required to make any real difference on the ground on feral pig populations and their impacts. So in terms of the vision of the plan is to deliver long-term active suppression or eradication where that may be feasible of feral pig populations to reduce their impacts to Australia's environment, our $65 billion agricultural sector, cultural sites and social assets. And it'll do this by guiding and supporting land managers to apply effective, coordinated, sustained and humane best practice management of feral pigs. Next slide, please. So in essence, the plan aims to support land managers with enhancing the effectiveness in applying best practice management techniques in an integrated and adaptive way over the long term, and encourage people to work together rather than individually and delivering the tools, technologies and resources, as well as training for this to happen. So the plan has 3 key goals. The first of these is focusing in on the national coordination, collaboration and leadership, looking at a landscape scale, the nil tenure application, as I've just mentioned, and strengthening the existing partnerships and developing new ones. The second goal is focusing in on community engagement and education. This includes building public awareness of the impacts from feral pigs to maintain the social licence for all the work that's required to control the populations. It's also looking at supporting skill and knowledge development of land managers of humane best practice management, applied in accordance with established standard operating procedures and codes of practice. The third goal is land manager focus, and I like to think of this one as being the doing area. So it's really, again, around increasing the adoption of best practice management methods and systems by land managers. And this is where we're looking at developing and applying existing and new approaches, technologies, resources, data management systems, and science-based knowledge, and as well as that, planning for adaptive management. And it's all focused here on having sustained long-term action, because the way that we've been funding and supporting a lot of the work that's gone on with feral pigs over the short term hasn't actually had a lot of impact really on the population. All of these will be supported by accurate monitoring and evaluation, setting up of systems for the collection, analysis and reporting of data to inform continuous improvement. Okay, next slide, please. Many of you deal with the many significant impacts that feral pigs create in the landscape, whether these are on our natural environment, our cultural sites, and or many agricultural industries. While these photos here are mainly agricultural, the threat abatement plan for feral pigs identifies that feral pigs adversely affect 148 species of threatened flora and fauna and 8 threatened ecological communities. Feral pigs really are an excellent pest. Their high reproductive rate ranks second only to rabbits. They're very intelligent, adaptive, and they're able to survive in a wide range of habitats as long as they have access to water, feed and shelter. Therefore, their populations can recover very quickly when water and feed availability are not constrained. Next slide, please. Knowing how many feral pigs that are out there, where they are, and assessing how much damage they are causing is very difficult. And this is despite whether it's on a state, regional, or at a local level. So dealing with feral pigs is mentally and financially demanding. And this is reflective, of course, of the time, effort, energy, and money that's being spent on their control. So the costs of damage to agriculture alone were estimated in 2002 to be in excess of $100 million per annum. The Australian Bureau of Agricultural Resource Economics and Sciences, or ABARES, are revising these, as well as updating national population and distribution data. The preliminary estimates of a total yearly national expenditure on feral pig control by private agricultural land managers has been estimated at $47.7 million. And this has been recently provided again through ABARES. I'm not in a position to question this, but this number is most likely to be a significant underestimate due to how people may be working this out. So this information, while it's all much needed now, will be extremely useful to influence land managers to work strategically and proactively together, as well as support business cases to attract ongoing sustained investment into feral pig management initiatives and all the R&D that's required to support this as well. Next slide, please. In our stakeholder survey that was conducted in September 2020, over 50% of the respondents, we had 776 people respond to this survey. 50% of them were primary producers. I'd like to thank all those who provided feedback into this survey. Next slide, please. So this slide shows that land degradation was the major impact that was reported by respondents, followed by crop and pasture damage, biosecurity threats and disease transmission, and fourthly, the loss of native flora and fauna. Next slide, please. We asked land managers where the costs from feral pigs were being estimated. Only 61 land managers from a total number of 441, or 19%, estimated costs. And these included those costs associated with exclusion fencing and their maintenance, aerial shooting, trapping, baiting, crop and pasture damage, stock losses, labour and other infrastructure. Next slide, please. We also asked land managers what data they were collecting. And of those who answered this question, only 32% of land managers collected data, with the majority obtaining information on the numbers dispatched or killed, followed by the number of pigs seen and their location, with this information being retained by individuals. So you can see here a lot of emphasis being placed on the numbers of pigs killed and not necessarily their impacts that they're causing. And this is also reflecting that it's difficult to estimate the impacts that are being felt by feral pigs. So how we can improve this to assist with managing populations at a landscape level is looking at being explored. The survey highlighted that tools are needed to assist land managers with estimating the costs and impacts being experienced, and this has been included as an action in the plan. We also found that 32% of primary producers had to change their on-farm practices, including more control activity, putting up exclusion fencing and growing of different types of crops. Next slide, please. So with the draft plan now being finalised for jurisdictional endorsement, what does all this mean? So as I've already mentioned, the plan provides a framework for coordination and collaboration and that alignment from the ground up to the national level. It's needing here to work together, and we're linking in with current activities and looking to identify new opportunities. We need to attract ongoing investment, and having an overall national strategy will assist in doing this. We're also wanting to drive effective integrated best practice management to support land managers in their control. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we need to work together and link in with the current initiatives already going on. Building and strengthening all of the work that's being done on the ground will be vital. We started to do this through the launch of our information hub. This hub provides information on feral pig management activities around Australia and aims to showcase the management activities and research programs that are underway, gain stronger awareness programs and the organisations that are involved. So really what we're trying to do here is build a community and to ensure here that if there are activities that are being conducted around Australia that people are aware of, it's actually building that network and ensuring that people can contact one another and using this hub as a way to do so. An example of what the hub looks like for New South Wales is shown on the right-hand side of this slide. It would be fantastic to include as many Landcare projects into the hub as possible to assist with building this community. I welcome you all to contact me or Jess Vanderweer, who is the Program Support Officer working on this project, to further discuss this. All the information included in the hub is only included once approval from each organisation is obtained. So far, we've identified over 100 coordinated and facilitated control programs being conducted by agencies and local groups, and these don't include Indigenous programs to date. And there are many more going on. Many of these groups are working in isolation from each other, identifying the need for regional coordinators to work more closely with local groups, as well as, of course, from a national perspective. The dots on this map denote a program or activity underway, and have been placed according to who's doing the work, not where the pigs are. Importantly, the map does not have any detail, so you can't zoom in to find geographical locations, and this is to manage privacy issues. The dots are coloured to identify the type of organisation that's involved in doing the work. When you click on a dot, a brief summary of the feral pig management activity is provided, as well as a website link. The hub is housed on our website, and the link for that is shown at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. So getting a more solid understanding of the work being done and the benefits on impact reduction being obtained remain big gaps to fill. Population, the first point I want to make from here as a key message is that population reduction targets of at least 70% are required when we're undertaking control activities. This just isn't possible by one method alone. So knowing how many pigs have been killed, whether you're doing an aerial shooting program, doesn't mean anything if you don't know how many pigs or the size of the population that you're dealing with in that given area. Often land managers don't conduct monitoring activities. And while this may be reflective that there's only a certain amount of resources available to undertake these programs, and they're directed into killing pigs rather than looking and undertaking some monitoring. So effort is most often directed into the removal of pigs rather than monitoring due to those limited funds that are available. And therefore, it's difficult to determine what difference the efforts have made to population reduction and the assets that are wanting to be protected. The second point here is landscape-based control. As I mentioned earlier, feral pigs don't recognise fences, land boundaries, or know who owns what land parcel. There's some great work going on, including the using of GPS collars to track pig movement in the landscape. And these are very effective in showing people that feral pig populations move within a defined home range and where and when they move. This work has helped to dispel local thinking about where pigs are moving in from, and it helps to stop the blame game and help and change how the issues are being addressed at the community level. Final point here is working together. We need to outsmart the pig. The best approach for effective feral pig management due to their mobility is to work together in coordinated management groups, and including landcare groups at a landscape level. So having the knowledge, tools and systems to help enhance the effectiveness of best practice management and those techniques, demonstrate the outcomes to attract others, and also how resources, including money, is applied over long term is vital. So all of this today is confirming that the action is required. Australia must reduce its feral pig population, and this needs to be delivered at a landscape scale, together in a coordinated manner, so we can maximise the impact and the value. This call to action is core business for Landcare. This provides us all with a significant opportunity to deliver significant benefit to your community, soils, water and biodiversity health. Final slide, please. So I look forward to working with you all as we move to implementing the plan. And please get in touch with myself or Jess Vanderweer. The details are here on this slide. We'd love to meet with you and learn more about your programs and support you to make a real difference on the ground during the years ahead. I encourage you all to get in touch with me using these contact methods. And as well as that, if you want to join our newsletter distribution list, please do so, and the link is available on this slide as well. So with that, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Heather. That was it's pretty thought-provoking. A lot of times I speak to people in the cities and they believe it's a farm problem, but you see the impact on beaches and wetlands and the habitats around that. It's a very considered case today. Thank you for that time. The evidence today confirms to me the action that's required, and to me, Australia must reduce its feral pig population, and it needs to be delivered at a landscape scale. You mentioned that uncoordinated. There's lots of funds, but it's been uncoordinated, so we don't really know if we're winning or not. So in a more coordinated method, to me, I believe this is core business for Landcare. So I look across Australia at the thousands of Landcare groups who are in this as core business. I think there's an opportunity for Landcare to play a good role if they're not already in the hub and they need to get in the hub. Is there a way that, is there something, what could Landcare groups that are sitting here today listening, what could they do to actually help with that next step?
Well, I think this is reflective here that right now it's actually the action on the ground that's important. So making sure that whatever is being done through Landcare groups is being done in the, making sure that you've got the right tools and the techniques being applied most effectively to get the biggest bang. So making sure that you're following the principles of management, and that's where Troy will be talking more about that. But making sure, of course, on the ground, there's that effort that is being done in a way that is not being wasted, and you're working together collaboratively to do so. So I think it's actually making sure that we can build those networks on the ground, because from there, that's what's needed to actually ensure that it cascades up into the national level. But the work is actually required on the ground, and that's where we'll be advocating for that to be strengthened and supported.
Yeah, okay, excellent. So Troy was having some trouble before. Is Troy still with us? Troy.
Yeah, I'm here.
Troy's there. G'day,
Yeah,
Troy.
just can't see. Hey.
Troy Crittle from New South Wales DPI. He's working right at the coalface in this problem. A quick wrap up, Troy. There's a lot of questions about best practice. What do I do? How do I know? How do I have that conversation? From your on-ground experience, where do we start? It's a big problem.
Well, it depends. Well, so I suppose the first thing is just to contact the pest control agencies in people's home states, because the states do run the program. So for New South Wales, it's contact your local land services biosecurity officer, and they can provide you information. If you just want general information, the Pest Smart website is a really good place to find really good best practice information. There's all sorts of stuff there, right from baiting feral pigs to running surveys to arrow shooting, all sorts of stuff. The standard operating procedures that are there are current, but they're also about to be updated as well. And there won't be any massive changes there, just a few kind of formatting issues there. So I'd say, look, if you want general info, Pest Smart is the place to go. But if you want specific information about setting up groups, or you actually want to be part of a group, then talk to your local provider within your state government.
All right, excellent. Okay, so when I work with Landcare groups all around Australia, I've heard a lot of the stories. Now, Heather mentioned that, dispelling some of the myths about movement and things like that. And with a lot of Landcare groups that are creating, a lot of farm groups, a lot of individuals that are creating impact without aligning it, a simple step would be to obviously make sure they're using best practice. But are there any support tools that are consistent with provider system? So if I was to provide a toolbox to Landcare groups so they can be participating and making sure that the numbers what's the best way to approach that?
So I can really only speak for New South Wales because that's where I work, but there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people who are ready to actually assist you to build groups and to do work. We've at an agency level, what my job is to do is to train new people that have come into the industry, so biosecurity officers. So we do a lot of that. We did one of those courses that Heather actually attended week before last as well. So that information is out there. I mean, there is a pretty good pool of people who've got some good knowledge, but there's some basic things that people can do around pig control. Do you want me to talk about those, or?
Yeah, I think the opportunity to point out the key. I guess from my perspective, I have a lot of people who don't know the impact that they're looking at, particularly in the conservation side of things. On an food production system, you can see the damage, the water quality, things like that. But when we see a lot of regional groups that are putting a lot of effort into restoration, one of the things I'd like to see Landcare is be able to provide information, pictures, and provide some images through the Landcarer site to show you guys what they're seeing and get some feedback on it. So if you've got some key indicators to look for, other than obviously seeing the pigs, then what the next steps would be. So if I've got a group that's gone down to their landscape today, they've been working on a creek or a wetland for a couple of years, and they're starting to see new damage, what do they do?
So it depends on what state they're in, of course. But look, what we'd first do is get together as a group and to do some. If you want to get ready to do some control, the very first step is just to free feed. And what we say is, if to remove the disturbance from those pigs. So kind of just assume that they're not there, ignore them, and then to put out some free feed. And that's the process is the same whether you want to bait or trap pigs. So we'd say remove the disturbance and then free feed those animals. That's a really good starting point. A lot of groups are using cameras and are sharing the resources to use cameras to monitor the pig populations in those areas. But you don't necessarily have to do that. I mean, if you've got some decent skills around identifying sign and that sort of thing, you don't need a camera on every site, but they've certainly helped as well. Cameras have helped a lot in determining what's actually happening on those sites.
Okay, excellent. Now, Heather, you mentioned in the discussion that a regional coordinator network will be established. Will that have on what sort of scale is that? Are we talking about one per state or one per catchment, or have we got an opportunity to understand that a bit more deeply and how that would work with Landcare groups?
Yeah, thanks, Mick. With that one, as I mentioned, it's included in the plan here because it's recognised that it'd be great to have that regional coordinated approach to help with getting those groups together. The issue right now is we need to actually work through how we'll support those. That's something that we're working on right now. We haven't got the resources right now to do that, but that's a really key focus in terms of how we're bringing in that support to help on ground activity. So that is very much a work in progress. But it's also a very key focus in terms of the where to.
Okay, it sounds, from my perspective, from speaking from a Landcare farming program, it seems like a good opportunity for Landcare farming networks or Landcare networks to be able to help provide the evidence to justify that investment and help sort of source the information to build that case. Would that be a good assistance to provide that information from the grassroots up to build an aggregation of information?
I think that'd be fantastic. I think that a lot of the gaps in all of this is that a lot of it, there's great work going on the ground now. It's making sure that we've actually got that visibility and actually being able to capture some of that information to better present the case, to support further work that's required to actually make the big difference that's required to manage the problem. So we are looking at here about how we can develop systems or utilise existing systems to actually capture that aggregated data. And I think it's the really key message here is that we are all in this together. Whether you're on the ground as a land manager, participant in a group, working with a state government agency, local government, and also from a coordinator role from my perspective, I think it's making sure that as a community, across all the stakeholders that are involved here, that we are actually united in the approaches that we're taking to actually have that one voice around the work that's required.
All right, excellent. All right, as we sort of hurting towards the end there a little bit, there's I guess from if you had, I'll go to both of you. You can choose who goes first. If you had a final wrap-up statement, a take-home message, if speaking directly to the thousands of Landcare groups around Australia today, if you could ask them to help you with one thing or a couple of things going forward, what would your final question to those guys or ask to those guys? What would you ask them to help you with directly?
If I had a magic, Troy? Look, if I had a magic wand, it'd be coordinating 1080 boating groups, because that gives us the best population knockdown. We can get around 95% if we do really good coordinated 1080 boating. And the one thing out of that generally goes wrong is that people don't free feed those pigs long enough. So my magic wand would be 10 to 14 days free feeding and then coordinated 1080 boating programs. Okay, excellent. Thanks, Troy. Heather, what's your secret to? I actually like Troy's wrap up. The magic wand, it was much more eloquent than mine. What's the magic wand that Heather needs to get her project really doing the best it can do and getting the maximum impact?
Well, I think it's actually how we all work together in that collaborative way, because we're only going to be as strong as our weakest link. So if we're ensuring that we are following the standard operating procedures and all of those principles for management, and ensuring that we keep the focus on what we're doing, that will actually help with ensuring that we get good effective control on the ground, and keeping, of course, land managers engaged and involved at the community level to keep going. All right. Well, I think from my perspective, that's a pretty good way to bring this to a head. For those who haven't participated in the Landcarer site, there's a Landcarer site, which is basically a Facebook or a LinkedIn for farmers and for Landcarers to provide the information. Now, Heather and her team have got a page set up on that under the Landcare Farming Program page, and it's a perfect opportunity. It's almost like a Facebook for farmers and conservationists. So those who are in the webinar today obviously know about Landcarer. These recordings will be live straight after the show and pushed out around so people can use them. Generally, we get quite a high viewing post presentation. So what I ask of the Landcare groups and the people that are watching is to forward this discussion around their groups, have a chat, and I'd love to see some participation in Heather's page and some information. So if you've got photos out there of impact that you're seeing, you've got questions for particularly New South Wales, but every state and territory's got a representative just like Troy. So
the primary contact through to Heather would probably a good starting point would be directly to Heather through her email. The details will come up again shortly, or through the Landcarer site where you can put up photos of the impact and ask questions, almost like a forum. I think would be a good opportunity to just get the best practice, the best questions, all the things answered that you're considering. What I liked about having this opportunity today on Landcarer was it's a different audience. Talking directly to farmers, they see it every day. Talking to conservationists, not always. So here's an opportunity to address and seek information and create that information you need directly with Heather, and that you can push through to Troy or that state representative. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time and your input today. Troy, I understand there's difficulties you had with your presentation, so I really appreciate you hanging in there. Much appreciated. To see so much knowledge in one room really is an excellent thing. So thank you very much for your time. What we can do is push these out to the networks and make sure that we cause that cascade going through. And once we start getting it further down the track, we might actually see if we can get some more information or an update in 12 months' time to see how you're going with that. To Landcarers, I'd like to see some photos, and I'd love to see a target of 100, 150 photos come up of the impact that you're seeing, some questions and things like that, and then we can have a direct conversation that can actually tailor the next webinar or the information you receive for your group. So thank you very much for attending as speakers, and thank you very much to the Landcare Network. As I said earlier at the start, this is a small snippet of what we have at the Landcare conference coming up in August. It's open for registration now. We've got some fabulous speakers from all around Australia and talking about environmental and farming and the impacts of animals, pests, new science, new research, best practices. So if you haven't got a ticket yet, you can get tickets online. Because of COVID this year, it will be also available online in some components of the presentation. So thank you very much for attending today, and remember to make sure that you have got the latest news on this project, the conference, and any of the other Landcare projects that are going. Sign up to Landcarer. Even start your own page if you are a group out there who wants to have a continuous feed of what's happening right now in Landcare. So thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.